Here's how I correct and ceramic coat cars in under 3.5 hours, and why I don't base pricing on paint condition, because it doesn't really matter. What's going on, guys? Luke here with Wilson Auto Detailing and Autodetailer.com. The black Land Cruiser you see me detailing, doing some correction, and ultimately ceramic coating in the studio is a great example of the average paint condition daily driver vehicle and average customer who wants a ceramic coating and some correction but doesn't want to pay a crazy amount, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 for it. Now, before I get into the business breakdown, let me give you the exact tools and products I am using. Generally speaking, for the package I'm going to describe in this video, I use a Lake Country microfiber cutting disc. Some call it medium cut, some call it heavy cut, maybe it's in between, but it's one of the most popular, probably the most popular pad that I use of all time. Secondly, for the correction package I'm describing in this video, I generally use something like the Coat Chemie Fine Cut or the Sonax Perfect Finish. It's generally something that has some cut to it. It's not just a finishing low cut, high gloss polish, but it's something that has some medium to light cut and also high gloss. Now, I should also add that at this point in my detailing business, I am almost always reaching for the Flex Forced Rotation Polisher to deliver this particular package because, as you'll see when I describe what I'm doing with the forced rotation, given the approach, I actually do get slightly better results than sometimes I get on some paints with the dual action, but you can use either one of these. Now, after years and years of doing this, I'm going to give you the high level bit of my exact tactical strategy. Generally speaking, I break any given area into a 4x4 section, maximum a 2x2 area that I'm actually polishing at any given time, and this changes, but it only goes down. I don't normally polish more than a 2x2 area. So you could take the driver's side or the passenger side door as an example. You ride across down the middle and you have 4 different quadrants, each around, call it 2x2. After my pad is primed, ready to go, maybe I've used it a couple times, I'm putting 4 small pea-sized dots on the 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and 3 o'clock area of the pad, and when I come in, I'm going to use heavy pressure. I know, crazy as it sounds, this is part of why I would rather use a forced rotation in these situations. I'm gonna go probably 5 to 7 passes of heavy pressure on a speed of about 5. So higher speed, heavy pressure. Then I back off of the pressure. I come down to about a speed 3. I finish with, call it 3 to 5 passes, and I'm almost always hitting about a 90-second time frame for each 2x2 or lesser section with this specific strategy. The reason I like a forced rotation to do this is because I am coming in with, like I said, heavy pressure, and because of that, if I'm going over a character line or a body line, I'm almost always going to stall because of the amount of pressure and downward force I'm using on a dual action, and so I do prefer a forced rotation. Now, just from a tactical perspective, for those of you freaking out about the heavy pressure, yes, I do this, many other detailers do it, okay, especially when you're seeing cars on a daily basis. Part of the reason why this works and I can get it done in a 90-second time frame is because, coupled with the right pad and polish, again, heavy cutting pad, lighter cutting polish, I'm able to get this combination of cut as well as great finish using the strategy I just described, and most of the cut happens on the front end, most of the gloss or enhancement happens on the back end, because I'm only doing a single stage correction before I ceramic coat this car. Now, let me give you my business logistics perspective of why I do it this way. What you find when you correct paint over and over and over again, no matter what the condition of the car is in or what color it is or what size it is that most vehicles and most paints fall under what I would call average condition. And so what I'm looking for when I correct paint, when I'm delivering this type of package, which I'll describe later, is I'm looking for the point of diminishing return, meaning I get the most out for the least amount of input, and then once I start putting in more and more inputs, I'm getting less and less and less and less out of the paint. So if you wanted to think about this logically, you could say, okay, let's pretend that I can only put the pad and the polish on the paint one time, versus I can put the pad and the polish on the paint 6 different times. After maybe the second or the third time of polishing that paint, and maybe even after the second time, you're gonna start to see little to no difference 4th time, 5th time, 6th time, kind of like if you go to the gym and you have a lot of weight to lose. In the first month, 2 months, 3 months of going to the gym, you're gonna lose most of that weight, and you're gonna see most of your friends are gonna say, wow, you look so different. But as you get skinnier and more in shape, let's say, people notice it less and less because it requires more inputs at the gym to continue to lose the same amount of weight, and you probably will get to a point where it's impossible to lose the same amount of weight because you've lost so much already. The inputs required are not going to give you the same outputs, and that's the point of diminishing return, and that is the point of this paint correction package. About 90 seconds using the strategy I just described reaches on the average vehicle, even despite black versus white color, the point of what I would call diminishing return. Now think about it this way. If I'm reaching the point of diminishing return after about 90 seconds of the strategy I described with the tool and product I just described, then you know that the customer is not going to be seeing some grand difference after I continue putting in more inputs in this single stage correction. And so to continue with the weight loss analogy, essentially what's happening here is in that single stage paint paint correction, what we're doing is losing that first 100 pounds. We're removing 70% of those swirl marks. We're bringing back the gloss, removing 100% of that oxidation. That stuff tends to happen on the average paint in that first go around, even in a 2-stage paint correction process. And because of that, I'm able to package this together in a way for the customer where I can get really quick results that they really love, and I can package and price appropriately to sell lots of higher margin paint correction and ceramic coating packages. Now, on that same note, one of the things I keyed in on early in doing paint correction and ceramic coatings was how important it was to, number one, be willing to do a test spot on a kind of inconspicuous area of a customer's vehicle to show them in real time the difference before and after of polishing versus not polishing in this strategy that I talked about. And secondly, to have a big Rolodex of different colored paints and different vehicles to show them before and after of this single stage paint correction package that they could buy to see what the difference looks like, because there is a bit of a learning curve and education curve with certain customers who are wanting paint correction and coatings to really understand the nature of swirl marks, how to see them, and how to judge them. Now, I want to tell you how I priced this package because it became one of my most profitable packages of all time in my detailing business. But before, I have to walk through time frames and give you how I thought through this from a very standard operating procedure paint correction perspective. I know a lot of content you see online is going to be all these hyper luxury cars and Lamborghinis and people talking about how it took them 24 hours to finish the paint correction, and certainly there is a place for that. But what I'm talking about is really more my perspective of a lot of my more average clientele over the years, which is how do I create sort of an SOP approach to this where I can give them what they want, make sure I build a hyper profitable business, and really enjoy the paint correction, detailing, results, and work that I'm doing. So here's how I thought about time frames. Most standard vehicles, despite the size of the tiny extremes of the Mini Coopers and the huge, 15 passenger vans, come with 4 different doors, a hood, and a trunk. So I'm speaking in generalities here. And if you divide each one of those into fourths, and each one of those fourths sections is no larger than a 2x2 section, which it generally would be, then you're talking about 24 different sections. Then you have lower bumper, fender areas, and the front grille, which again, more nuanced because they're not necessarily a standard size, but they all come around the same size. These can generally be broken up in sections of 2 or 3, so maximum you're talking about another about 15 individual sections. Then we have the roof, and depending on the size of the car, you're talking about somewhere between 4 and 8 sections, not including the sunroof. So if I add all of those sections up together and I take it to its maximum degree, meaning we're talking about an actual large vehicle here, adding up all of those sections, we come to just under 50. It's about 47 to 50 sections, again, on the high end. These are small 2x2 sections. Now, using the strategy that I described that I used earlier, I got my time to about 90 seconds on average per section. Again, 5 to 8 passes with a pretty heavy pressure, pulling it up, pulling the speed from 5 to 3, and then sort of glossing or jeweling the paint again very quickly to work as that finishing step. Took about 90 seconds per section. So I multiply 90 seconds per section. Essentially, I come out to about 70 minutes. Now again, that's not including breaking out different pads and cleaning them out, but just in paint correction time, using this approach, it's about 70 minutes, which is just over an hour. Now let's just generously add another 40 minutes for you taking a break, drinking water, wiping off the paint. If you do that in between each section, maybe blowing out the pad, 40 or 50 minutes. Now we're talking about a total of about 110 to 120 total minutes. And that means we're coming in at 2 hours or just under at about an hour 50 in our entire paint correction process using the strategy I just described. Now let's just double that number, even though it doesn't take nearly as long in order to actually apply a ceramic coating, but let's just double it for the sake of giving ourselves plenty of time. We come out to about 3.7 total hours, under 4 hours for total paint correction and ceramic coating application. Now, there are 2 primary metrics I use to create a pricing for a service like this, and neither is actually the precondition of the paint, which is how most detailers think about this. Number 1, I use color, and number 2, I use size. Here is why. In the cases where you're dealing with paint that is so damaged, so oxidized, so riddled with swirls and etchings, the strategy that I'm describing is not going to work. And if that customer wants to see improvement in their paint, they're going to have to pay thousands of dollars to put in the actual work that it's going to take to reset some of those panels, or the things that we're going to be able to do through traditional paint correction means are not going to make a big enough difference for them to be able to see. So it's kind of like, again, if you're losing a bunch of weight, but you only go to the gym for the first 3 days, and then you blame the trainer for the fact that they only took you there for 3 days and your expectation was to lose a bunch of weight, you're going to say, oh, wait a second, this is not going to work unless I put in a lot more time, right? I have to go for a month, 3 months, 6 months before I actually measure the difference. Same thing here. So precondition condition of the paint does not become a contributing factor to my price point because of the cars that are seeing this particular type of service. They fall under the average of the bell curve. In other words, the ones that are crazy damaged and that this wouldn't really work with are excluded from a service offering like this. And when you get under the bell curve, no matter if it's tending towards being a little bit better condition or tending towards being a little bit worse condition, those things do not actually make a big enough difference in your 90-second approach time, the heavy pressure, light jeweling of the paint, and then moving on. If the paint is in a little bit better condition than average, you're not going to get it done in 60 seconds versus 90 seconds. You're going to spend the same 90 seconds. Versus if it's in slightly worse condition than, again, the average of that bell curve, assuming it's not extreme, the same 90 seconds is going to get you to that point of diminishing return that I talked about earlier anyways. You're going to get that max cut and then that finishing, and you're not going to have to spend 120 seconds to do that. It will happen in that 90 seconds. So I like to think in terms of averages like this when I'm approaching pricing and service packages because it allows me to give the customer what they want, make sure I'm compensating for my time, and bring all of these more expensive, higher margin services into these deliverables that can happen in a single day. Now, just to be really tactical here, the package in terms of the single stage paint correction and ceramic coating that I just described, baseline in my business is offered publicly at $1,000. So it doesn't start at $999, doesn't start at $900, it starts at $1,000. The two things that increase that price are number one, if we're dealing with dark or black paint, and number two, as we increase the size of the vehicle, the price goes up from there. Now here's how that works. I add an additional $200 minimum as the size category of the vehicle increases. And what I mean by size category is if we move from sedan to small SUV to standard SUV to XL, and XL to larger like 15 passenger vans. In addition to that, if we are dealing with anything small SUV or under, and we're dealing with dark or black paint, I add an additional $200 to the top line or overall price. And then once we hit standard SUV or larger, that price becomes $350 additional straight up on the entire package. All right, guys, I hope that was a helpful business approach, which is how I tend to think about things in my detailing business too, how to package and price for really popular high margin ceramic coating and paint correction packages that you can start offering literally today underneath that average bell curve like I'm talking about for most customers. If you want a full breakdown of all the tools and products I suggest, go to wilsonautodetailing.com and grab the Pro Detailing Toolbox full list and online video by video explanations of what I suggest and why for any of you guys starting out. And if you already have a detailing business and you want to grow faster by plugging into a network of hyper qualified detailers also running businesses in your same revenue range, join us at autodetailer.com. Would love to see you join membership there if you qualify. And if you got value here because you're all about becoming more efficient in your business, then check out the video on screen where I show you how to cut 30% off of your interior detailing time using products and tools you already have so you don't have to spend any more money.